Build after lunch. I pray that everyone gets something out of Bill's message and that all the youth get something out of Mr. Jeremy's message. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Okay, you may be seated, and we're going to dismiss the classes. So, over at the door with Miss Summer and Miss Karen, the 3-year-old treasures. 3-year-olds. You are dismissed. And parents, as we dismiss these classes, any of the classes, all the way up through the senior quiver, if you have not gone and talk to the teachers, if your child's going for the first time, please go with them today, just briefly, to give them a little bit of information to the teachers, and then you'll be able to come right back. That's for all classes. Okay, we are ready for quiver, all ages 10 through 18, through the main hallway over here. General Mrs. Dahl, yes, she's over there waiting for you. And a great vacuum happens in the building. I love it, though. It means the Father's already got roots growing deep. Yay, the rest of the family's with us. Hey, rest of the family, we're glad you're here. Even though you're probably at home in pajamas and having popcorn. It's okay, we're not jealous. Okay, treasures. Get ready, just a minute. Let's give the rest of the quiver a chance to head out. They got a serious discussion going on up here. It's big business. Okay, and they keep going. Lots of quiver. Okay, treasures 8 and 9 with Miss Donna. Over at the door, Miss Donna Hinkle's over there. Treasures 8 and 9. All right, is that all of our 8 and 9-year-olds? There's the last of them, okay. Now we have treasure 6 and 7 with Miss Rachel. She's standing over there in her pretty blue shirt. Wow, Miss Rachel, your class is really excited. And there's quite a few of them too. And last but not least, with Miss Katie Hood, ages 4 and 5. 4 and 5-year-olds with Miss Katie Hood. Okay. We're so thankful for our teachers. I pray that they just have a really good class time today. They're teaching such important stuff, and we hear about it when they come back in and have their projects and their papers and everything. And I hope y'all hear about it at home when they're doing their memory verses. Right before Bill comes up, I just wanted to mention, we do have a member of the family, and I'm not going to say anybody's name or anything because I didn't ask permission to do that. So this person needs a touch from the Father immediately to dry up a lung situation, to just go into the cells of the body and give strength, just from an ongoing battle. And just enough is enough. And so I think if we all pray, some of us have already prayed today, but will you please, as the Father lays it on your heart, pray for this person. We want this person well and back where they belong. So if you will, just lift this person up, not just today, but throughout the week, so that really soon we'll see this person back with us, okay? Thank you.
No, thank you. Nothing I can have, anyway. She asked me if I needed anything. Is this yours? Do you need anything? Okay. Glad I could help you out there. All right. Well, that was quick. I hadn't even gotten up here. We got questions up on the board. But before we do that, I need a helper today. Who shall it be? Thank you. Appreciate that, Gaby. I was going to call on you anyway, but I thought maybe staring would prompt you to raise your hand. So, yeah, it worked. So next time I need anything from somebody, hold on, I got the wrong mic. That's your mic. This is mine. If I need something from somebody, I'll just stare at you. See what happens. All right, so if you will, Gaby, just identify those people who, we want to start out talking about the Torah portion, talking about the message, those kinds of things. And if we have time later, we'll get into, other topics if you wish. But I do want to kind of stay topical, at least starting out. You spoke of extremes today. Can you explain in terms of extremes? I will look at your verse and we'll see. The extremes that I was talking about aren't, in my view, extremes. I was talking about how people see things as being extreme because they're in a mixed and mingled state of mind. But I will look at your passage and see what you're referring to. Okay, so Ecclesiastes 7, verses 16 through 18. Be not righteous overmuch, neither make yourself overwise. Why should you destroy yourself? Be not over much. Be not overmuch wicked, neither be foolish. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of the one, yes, also from the other withdraw not your hand, for he that fears God shall discharge himself of them all. That's a good question. I understand why you're asking the question, but I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more before I give an answer. Because it on the surface, it would sound like he's saying kind of hang out in the middle. My first response to that is just instinct to say there's something probably I need to better understand about this. However, I will point out that at the end of his life, Solomon had how many wives? And how many of them were foreign? Okay, so Solomon didn't end well. So good question. I want to look into that, but I'm not going to give you a response just yet until I've had a little time to dig into it. Hopefully that's fair enough. All righty, where's my microphone? Nobody wants to say anything? Everybody wants to take a nap? Okay, Stephen Lane is nodding his head, yes, we want to take a nap. So. Oh, okay. The other Mr. Lane.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to you, sir.
Along the lines of extremism, I've always thought of it as being a maximalist, not an extremist, that Yeshua gives us the Torah in a way that allows us to take it to the highest level, which would be a maximalist, and don't really like to consider ourselves extremists, but I think maximalist is a little softer.
Well, taking things to their fruition. Yeah, okay. So again, just to clarify, when I said that, when I use the term extreme or extremist, what I had in mind would be the perspective of someone who's in the Laodicean mindset. To be overly, righteous would be from someone from the perspective of that person would seem extreme. Just like the other, my Osama bin Laden example. People see him as an extremist, but he actually believed in the Quran. He believed what was written in the Hadith. He believed all of these things. So was he an extremist or was he a fundamentalist? Was he someone who actually followed through on those things that he said he believed? So I do not see myself as an extremist either. I see myself as someone who was trying to pursue the fullness of what the Father has called us to be. Now, but there are going to be people in this world because we are going to take a very adamant stand on certain things. I'll use the abortion issue, okay? It's murder, plain and simple. That's all it is, right? But that is going to be considered an extreme view by a lot of people in the secular world. And even within, unfortunately, and sad to say, within the body would take that view. But that doesn't mean we're extreme. That means we're adamant about where we stand on certain things. So that's why I was using that terminology.
Understood. And then my next question would be about prosperity and things that we have here, and using that as a sign of our obedience or disobedience, and maybe the Father's hand on us or maybe against us. And is it possible for all of us to experience seasons where we have maybe not less of what we need, but less of what the world might consider to be godly or blessings or an abundance of things? Because there's certainly seasons within, and I think I've heard you talk about seasons within your life that you didn't have necessarily what you might have wanted to have, or what the world might expect somebody to have. And is there a time period where we can feel comfortable in that season without it being that we're not listening to what we need to listen to get beyond that season?
Well, first of all, prosperity, as the Lord defines it, might be a lot different than the way society defines it, right? I am a firm believer that God will give us everything we need, but I'm not convinced he is always going to give us everything we want. In fact, sometimes he denies us the things that we want because it's not what we need. And he knows what that would do, in a negative sense, if he were to just give us everything we want. Do some people prosper in terms of material things, property, these kinds of things more than others? Yeah, I do. And I think that in some of those cases, it's because God can trust those people with those things because he knows that that's not their God. Abraham seems to me was a wealthy man, but there's no hint that his prosperity, and his abundance became something that came between him and the Father. So back to your question. I think there are times that God will allow us to go through lack just to see if it's in our heart to continue serving him, as we said we do. In Deuteronomy 8, he led you through the wilderness all these 40 years to test you, to see what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commandments or not. He caused you to hunger. And by the way, that word in Leav is the same Hebrew word for famine. He allowed you to experience hunger and famine. Why? So that he could give you bread that you didn't know, your fathers didn't know, you weren't familiar with it, but to teach you something through that. So yes, I do believe that there are seasons in our life that we may not have everything that would make life comfortable and easier. And sometimes I believe that he puts us to that test to see, are you going to serve me anyway? And then there are times that he does allow us to enjoy. I'm going to be very careful how I say this. Prosperity as we would tend to define it. But sometimes, and this is another element we didn't really get into too much today, sometimes prosperity is the last sign he sends before he brings judgment. And so we need to be aware of that kind of that component of things as well. I think at the end of the day, if we're walking upright before him, striving to live a set-apart life, not a perfect life, but we're striving to live that set-apart life. I do believe that he does exactly what he said he would do, that he gives us the rain in due season. The ground's going to produce the way it's going to produce, and, that we're going to have those things that we need to live life. We'll probably be very busy, and I was talking to somebody at ONEG, when God gives us work and it's prospering and it keeps us busy, that's a good thing. That's a blessing. And so I believe that he does those things. So I know that some people feel that, and I do not agree with this, that if you're living right, that everything is, hunky-dory and everything's roses and, there's always plenty of money in the bank and there's always the abundance of this. And I don't think it always turns out that way. I do believe he gives us everything we need. And sometimes right then when we need it, so did I answer all of the components of
Absolutely.
your question?
And for me, I know personally, he has given me everything that I could have never afforded. No matter how hard I worked, I couldn't have bought my precious wife and family and things
Right.
like that. So, that's where my treasure is. And that's certainly a hard subject to be accurate on, because there's such a range of that within even this group of having and then not having. And
Yeah.
and it is that is I guess just one simple thing. You had my youngest boy's name is Cole, Kol. He had his name up on the screen today.
Oh, okay. Did he catch that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Craig. When it says in the word, when you are in the land, do we take that literally? Are we to follow all the commands even though we aren't in the land of Israel? First of all, yes, I do take it literally. The Shemitah year, for instance, it specifically says when you are in the land, every seventh year you let the land rest. I believe that is a command that is specific to when you are in the land, because that command is not addressed to while you're in the wilderness. That being said, I believe the principles that are for when you are in the land still work outside of the land. There are a number of people outside of the land who have appropriated the sabbatical year, for instance, and where they live, allowing the land to rest in the seventh year. So, and I think Patrick Tyree, he's not here right now, it doesn't look like, but I think he has a big testimony about that, how they let their land rest in the seventh year, and how they had just such an abundance going into that and coming out of that. So, do I take it literally that it is pertaining to the land? I do. I absolutely do. But do I believe the principles apply outside of the land? I absolutely do. Because the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, right? He uses the land of Israel, he uses the people of Israel to be a light to all of the other nations, so that what he does in Israel, through Israel, for Israel, can also bless the rest of the nations. That's what he told Abraham. Through you and your seed will be a blessing to the nations. So those commandments that are given to the people and for the land, if they are given to be an example to the nations, then it seems to me very logical and very reasonable to expect those principles apply outside of the land as well. So hopefully that's addressing your question. Where am I? Yes, ma'am. You just flip that switch. Just go straight up with it.
Got it, I think.
There you go.
All right. I just wanted to comment on the extremes. I guess the way I look at it is it's about commitment, how committed you are and fully convinced, whether one direction or the other. And that's why it's so dangerous in the middle, because if you're not fully committed, you could be pulled in the wrong direction. And then I just wanted to make a comment with him about the prosperity and you're talking about the desert time, and even Yeshua went through 40 days in the wilderness, and he did nothing wrong, but he still had to go through testing and see that he was faithful.
And if he had to endure it, then certainly we are, right?
There's nothing new as far as testing goes.
Right.
It's nothing. It's no
Well,
comment.
and where Yeshua is concerned, he says, you know what? When someone said, I want to follow you, and he says, you sure? Because the Son of Man doesn't even have a place to lay his head. The foxes have holes, right? But the Son of Man has no place to rest his head. So, and yet we don't get any hint that he was lacking in anything that counted, right? So, was that all? Thank you, ma'am. Doesn't Isaiah 8:20 preclude even listening to those who do not pursue Torah? Also, according to 2 Timothy 4:3, we're not supposed to heap up teachers to entertain. Well, let me look up Isaiah real quick. I don't have that particular passage memorized. So, 8:20. All right. I'm going to read verse 19. And when they shall say unto you, seek unto the ghosts and the familiar spirits that chirp and that mutter, should not a people seek unto their God on behalf of the living unto the dead for instruction and for testimony? Surely they will speak according to this word wherein there is no light. So if that is, sometimes the Hebrew Bible is a little off from others, but does somebody have a non-Hebrew Bible that can verify that's what Isaiah 8:20 says? So I want to make sure that I'm actually reading the same thing that you're referring to. Can somebody verify that for me, please? Okay, so the word instruction here, yeah, okay, so it's the word Torah. All right. So then, does it preclude listening even to those, all right, does Isaiah 8:20 preclude even listening to those who do not pursue Torah? Okay. So in the regard that they do not pursue instruction, because foolish people don't receive instruction. So then I wouldn't listen to foolish people. But now I'm going to ask you a question. Are you suggesting that we shouldn't listen to people who are not, as we define it, Torah pursuant? So that's a question I have for you. Because if we're reading this correctly, understanding it correctly, basically it's saying that we're not going to listen to people who do not receive or who do not, who do not honor and respect instruction. So, those who reject instruction are foolish. So obviously wouldn't listen to the foolish. Now, as far as 2 Timothy 4:3, heaping up teachers, people having itching ears, they heap up these teachers to tell them what they want to hear, is the way I understand what Paul's saying there. And so obviously, no, we don't want to be those kinds of people. In fact, let me just go over and read it again. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. They being, I think, the body, people in the body anyway. They will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts, they will heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. In other words, to me what that says is the problem is that people not willing to endure the sound doctrine will go find people to tell them what they want to hear. That's how I interpret it. In fact, they go on and shall turn their ears away from the truth and be turned to fables. Listen to things that just simply are not true. So the issue there is, it's preceded by the exhortation to Timothy to preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. Speak the truth, because there are going to be people in time that will not be able to endure the truth. In Hebrews 12, I think it's verse 20, and it's talking about the generation that stood at the foot of Mount Sinai. They saw the smoke, they heard the thunderings, they heard the lightning and all these things, but it says that they couldn't endure what God spoke. In fact, it says that they could not endure what was commanded. And so that's why they wanted God to quit speaking. So that's always been an issue. In the last days, it seems that it will be kind of accentuated, and that's all the more reason for us to speak the truth. But people will find somebody who will tell them what they want to hear. They've already decided what they want it to be, but they just have to find somebody to help them justify it. And there's always going to be those kinds of people who will do that. So then relating that back to what you were asking in Isaiah 8, I would say the common denominator here is that we don't want to be people who, to justify what we want to do, go looking for teaching that will accommodate that. We want to find those people who will tell us the truth as it is written, and not even their opinion necessarily, but what is written, and to gravitate toward those people, those kinds of teachers, those instructors, because tying it back to Isaiah 8, refusing to do that is foolish, And the foolish person is going to be one who rejects instruction, who rejects what the scriptures have to say. So, but if you have an answer response to what I ask you, make sure you get that in so we can come back to that. All righty, where am I? Sir.
I had an interpretation for your Ezekiel passage, Ezekiel 7.
Ezekiel?
Sorry, Ecclesiastes.
Oh, okay.
All right. Don't be excessively righteous like a Pharisee. Do not act excessively wise like a know-it-all, lest you destroy yourself when you fall or you're wrong. Do not be excessively wicked like Hillary Clinton. Do not be a fool like Hunter Biden, lest you die before your time. It is good to take hold of one of these, to be at least not one of these, and also must not let go of the other. It's better to be none of these. Whoever fears God will hold both of them secure.
I can say that was not what I would have come up with exactly, but I like it.
Selah.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that very much. I needed the chuckle. All right. Last week was Isaiah 49, 14 through, okay, the Haftarah. This week was Isaiah 54 through 55. Many Messianic congregations do not include Isaiah 52 through 53. Why do many in this walk bypass this reading? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. Beth, what was the Haftarah? I know it started in Isaiah 54, but did it go over to this week's? Well, I'm sorry. Last week, the Haftarah, was it Isaiah 49, 14 through 51, 3? Is that correct? Yeah, is that correct? Okay, so I think I'm understanding what you're asking now. So last week, the Haftarah that you cited there, we didn't actually come up with that Haftarah reading. That's something that's been established for a long, long time. And the same for this week. So really the question is, why was it decided at some point to, in times past, to pass over Isaiah 53? Is it in 52? Okay, but I think what they're really getting at, what Scott's really getting at, is why Isaiah 53 seems to be bypassed. Okay, and Isaiah 53 is about the suffering servant. Okay, so a long time ago, and I mean a long time ago, centuries ago, many centuries ago, my understanding is Isaiah 53 was interpreted to be referring to the Messiah, but because believers in Yeshua kept bringing that out, there is some reason to believe that some in modern Judaism wanted to kind of avoid that particular chapter. In fact, my understanding is that in some circles it's called the forbidden chapter or something to that effect. So it's not, I don't think it's a decision that Messianic congregations have made to overlook that and bypass that. I think it's that many congregations read the Haftarah according to the reading format that's been laid out long before any of us gotten into this, and we just kind of adopted the Haftarah readings that we have been there for many years. So I don't think it's an intentional attempt to bypass that, to ignore it, or anything like that. I think it's just a matter of, in our custom, to read the Haftarah according to what tradition has already established from long ago. So, but to the point of Isaiah 53, there are those in modern Judaism who do want to avoid that passage because of believers' insistence that this is talking about the Messiah, which I agree with, by the way. In fact, there is a kind of a relatively newer interpretation of Isaiah 53 that the suffering servant is Israel, which I don't disagree with that. I think both are correct. because what pertains to the Messiah is going to pertain to the body. He's the king of Israel, so the king suffers, the people of the kingdom are going to walk through some of the same things. Just like our sister pointed out, Messiah had to go into the wilderness and had to be subjected to the testing there. So do we. So anyway, hope that was an appropriate response. Where am I? Mr. Lang?
Over here, I have a question on Deuteronomy 14, where it talks about tithing. And I've often heard it kind of wrote off or put in that, we wouldn't expect to pay the tithe in the produce of our fields today, or in the livestock, or in the increase that he provides, that modern day transactions are done with modern day money. And that this morning I came upon a realization that this man was claiming that, especially in the land of Israel, that eating produce that was grown, raised, and then put to market without the tithe being paid on that produce was worse than somebody that consumed pork. And that he didn't think that the wholeness of that implied to parts outside of the land of Israel, but that the practice of that was a good practice.
The practice of tithing at large, or just the produce and
making sure that the produce that we consume has actually had a tithe paid off of that produce from the farmer.
Okay, how are you going to, when you go to the grocery store, how are you going to do that?
Not going to be and that's what part of, he had said that even like at farmers markets, you go to a farmer's market and you think that it's the farmer, but he's just a broker buying produce from another. So he really, it gets really complicated. I don't know certainly don't know what the right.
So are you making a comment or asking a question?
Asking a question if there's some validity to that or as if we were to be produce suppliers, to make sure that we're applying to giving a tithe on the produce that we produce, so that the people that buy our produce are then blessed and not cursed by the lack.
Well, living in exile is going to make all these kinds of things, at the very least, difficult, would you say?
Oh, absolutely, because this is the first time, and it's like I never even had that thought before this morning. Like there could be some validity to the produce not being what it should be, because we're not giving that back, that what he demanded back to him.
Well, as I said earlier, the things that pertain to the land, I take them very literally, but I also think the principle can apply, okay? Tithing is one of those things that we can't, well, most of us cannot do it the way it was done as it's worded for us here, because, we don't really live in an agrarian society anymore, right? So then how does somebody do that? There's probably no perfect and ideal way to appropriate this. And so this is gonna fall into the category for me as one of those things that if, as children of God, we understand the principle behind it in terms of, being grateful, being thankful. And before we feed our face, we give thanks to the one who's provided all these things for us. And of course, then there's part of, not this particular issue, but there's tithes that actually supported the priesthood and those who were serving in the temple and those kinds of things, which we don't have that either, ideally, or, the way it was. So there are specifics that we can't really do, but there's principles that we can apply, right? You would agree with that? So as children, not knowing exactly how we do this on the technical side of things, do we not do it at all, or do we try as best we know how, as he gives us insight, to do what is pleasing to the Father, okay? So I am not going to personally get bogged down into, did the grocery store that I'm getting this food from acknowledge with the farmer that he had actually paid tithes of this? I'm not going to get bogged down in that, all right? I am going to give of the increase that he has provided for me. And for most people in this day and time, that's going to be through monetary means, even through, it's not even cash anymore, it's digital now, you know. But the principle is we're going to acknowledge that this belongs to you. You know, whatever this is, it belongs to you. And so I am going to set that apart for this particular reason. And then, of course, there's different tithes, you know, for different purposes, right? So I don't believe that we, and this is my point, I don't believe that we can do it exactly the way it was done. I believe that we can, as little children, come before him and say, I really don't know how to do this other than this way. Is this acceptable? Because my heart is to do what's pleasing to you. So to kind of underscore that idea, I'll tell you the story again. We lived in Florida. It was just Brandon and Nate at the time, the little guys. And so there was a day that they were going to make us breakfast in bed. Remember this story? And at the end of it, we found a knife in the milk jug, and not in the milk jug. And as far as the mechanics of it, it was pretty ugly. But their intent was to do something that was pleasing. So I, as this earthly father, able to discern that my children's heart was to do something pleasing to me, even though mechanically they got it all wrong. And yes, we told them, don't stick the knife in the milk jug, you know. Yes, that's why it was on the ceiling. So, yeah, it was on the ceiling. So we tried to help them get better about the mechanics of it, but we didn't refuse their offering because they didn't have the mechanics all worked out. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? We have a lot of challenges being in exile. You know, there's a lot of things that I don't think get cleared up until the Messiah is here and he says, this is exactly how to do it. So I, for one, choose not to get too bogged down into wringing my hands over things I cannot control. But the things that I do have the ability to do, principally, I'm going to try to do those things. And if I feel like that if we're doing something really completely wrong, he has a way of bringing it to our attention and bringing correction to that. For example, I would be one of the first at the table to eat that Virginia cured ham on Easter Sunday, right? But along the way, he said, I want to show you a better way, right? And he continues to bring us along. So back to whoever said this, I'm not prepared to say that the way he laid it out is worse than eating pork. That's maybe his opinion, and maybe there's a reason and a logic he got to that. I'm not prepared to say that because I know that, you know, I can tell the difference between a steak and a pork chop, but I can't know for certain whether or not the groceries I'm buying at the store that the farmer paid a tithe on it. And so Paul had an apples and oranges observation about things concerning food. And basically, for sake of conscience, you know, you just don't get bogged down in some of these things. You receive it with thanks, you know, and I'm paraphrasing what he said. And so as showing gratitude and thankfulness to him, those things that he does increase in our lives, we should be thankful. And some of that should be set aside as this is yours. There are people in this congregation that have gardens. And the first fruits of those gardens, they set it aside. Sometimes they give it to us as, you know, their acknowledgement of this first fruits and such. And we're very appreciative of that, especially when it's yellow squash. Anyway, I ramble. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. And I know that there are people out there who disagree, but that's where I'm at.
That was kind of be my next question, is that could we expect another blessing when we do buy produce from people within our community that are doing what they should do the whole time?
Well, I think it is a blessing for when people do that. And I think it's a blessing that anything we can do as a community to encourage one another, support one another, to bless one another, that's always a good thing, right? But I don't think it's necessarily wrong for us to think that going to the grocery store and buying produce is going to somehow be some great transgression of something. Again, I am very confident that if we are doing something that we shouldn't be doing, and it's time for us to learn to do it the right way, he has a way of bringing that instruction and correction to us in its appropriate time. But I'm also kind of the view that, and I hope I want to say this the right way. Well, it's just like, before they came into the land and that place where he had set his name, and you're going to bring your offerings and sacrifices here. Before that happened, they were kind of doing what they had to do. Kind of a same idea. When it's time and he wants to fix some of those things that are broken, he'll show us and he'll demonstrate that. I think he's got, could I say that this is the Almighty? He has bigger fish to fry right now. He's trying to get our hearts in line. He'll work on our theology later, but he's trying to get our hearts where they need to be. All right? Yeah, come back to that. Yes, sir. Just flip that button, that switch, push it up.
This might be an unfair question.
Okay, I'll give you an unfair answer, I guess.
John 6:4. There's some thought by some that this passage was added. And it was added to lengthen the ministry that Christ had while he was on the earth from 1 year to 3.5. What are your thoughts?
I don't want to address my thoughts on that. Well, number one, and this is not to be disrespectful, let's focus on the Torah portion and some of these things here first. But that's not a debate I want to get into, quite honestly. So, wasn't an unfair question, just to get the answer you probably were looking for, okay? Not to be unfair. All right.
It's a difficult question to answer, and I've heard a lot of theology on both sides of that issue, but it is a difficult question.
I have friends who feel very strongly one way or the other. And as far as I'm concerned, this is not a debate that's going to be resolved to everyone's satisfaction this side of the kingdom, which is why I'm not going to get into the debate. I have some opinions, but that's, I don't have any points that are worthy of, trying to debate the issue. So, okay. All righty. On the subject of tithing, is it on our income or surplus? Some people say we are to give based, I guess is what you're saying, based on what's left over after our bills. Well, if it were the latter, then that's saying that, we're putting all of our bill collectors ahead of what belongs to God. So I would say that what belongs to God comes out first, and then the bill collectors get the rest. That's my view on it anyway. All right. Where am I? Yes, sir.
Okay. I've done a lot of study in the Passover, and I just wanted some insight on Deuteronomy 15 and 16, because sometimes chapter margins in the scripture aren't correct, and it seems that to be the case in Deuteronomy 15, because the first 18 verses are concerning the poor and the year of release and slavery and things like that. Well, when you get to 19, it goes into setting apart your firstborn males from your herd and your flock, and it says that you don't shear them or work them, and that you eat them in the place where Yahweh chooses to make his name dwell. And then going into 16.
Okay, now we're in chapter 15?
Yeah, 15, the end of 15.
Okay.
Starting in verse 19.
Okay.
And the particular verse is, set apart to Yahweh, your Elohim, all the firstborn males that come from your herd and your flock. Do not work with the firstborn of your herd, nor shear the firstborn of your flock. You and your household are to eat it before Yahweh your Elohim year by year in the place which Yahweh chooses. If you go over to 16, verse 2, the very first thing it says, and you shall slaughter the peish to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and from the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put his name. Okay, so if we go back to Exodus, we know that the firstborn sons were all covered by the blood of the lamb or the goat that was slaughtered on the first Passover. And then you go to Exodus 13:13, it says that you're to ransom all the firstborn of your sons and of your donkeys. And it specifically says that you ransom the donkey with a lamb. So my thought on this or question has been that since Yahweh says to set apart the firstborn males from the herd or the flocks, is that animal becoming the ransom for the firstborn sons if it's being slaughtered and eaten every year at the Passover according to 15 and 16 in Deuteronomy?
Well, as far as the firstlings of the flock and herd, I don't know that that is necessarily equivalent to what he's addressing as far as the Pesach. So say your question again. Let me make sure I'm following you here, okay?
Okay, so my question is, because it seems like the end of 15 is leading into 16.
Okay.
And it says to set apart all your firstborn males and that you're to eat them in the place where Yahweh chooses to make his name dwell. And then you go to 16, it says, and guard the new moon of Abib and perform the peish to Yahweh your Elohim. For in the new moon of Abib, Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. And you shall slaughter the peish to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put his name. So it's pretty much the same verbiage that it's using in 15, saying that you don't work the firstborn males, that you slaughter them in the place where Yahweh chooses to make his name dwell. And then it says the exact same thing in 16 again. So that's what led me to believe that. And I was just wondering if you had any insight on that.
But you said something about in regard to the firstborn males. So that's the part I'm trying to track with you on. Okay, so again, you read, I understand what you're saying. You read at the end of 15, you set apart the firstborn of your flock and your herds. And then it leads into talking about the Pesach.
Yeah.
Right? Which is going to be a male lamb of the first year without blemish.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So, but there was that part of the question I was trying to track with you on.
Okay, yeah. That's going back to Exodus 13. Because in Exodus 13, I believe it's verse 12, it says that all the firstborns belong to Elohim.
Okay.
And you're to
Talking
slaughter.
about your males among your children.
Yeah, you're to
right?
slaughter the firstborn of the clean animals, but a donkey or a firstborn son has to be covered or ransomed. So I was wondering if in the firstborn animals being set apart to Elohim, if Yahweh, much like with Isaac and Abraham providing the ram, as the ransom for Isaac, was he providing the ransom for the firstborn sons by telling them to butcher or to slaughter the firstborn of their flocks and herds, as a replacement of the firstborn sons? Does that make sense now?
I think I'm following you. But let's just back up. All right, so the first of everything's supposed to be his, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, including your sons, right?
Yes.
The males. Okay, so let's tackle that first. Before the establishment of the Levitical priesthood, do you agree that the firstborn males probably functioned or were supposed to function in some priesthood role?
I think that's definitely true because Numbers 8 leads to say that. It says that when he killed all the firstborn of Mitzrayim, he set all the firstborn of Israel apart to himself. And then he goes on to say that he's choosing the Levites in their stead that day. So, yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Okay, so just to kind of understand the purpose, what might be tied to setting apart your firstborn, these are mine, among your males, these are mine. It just seemed that there would be a purpose for it, So that's why I connected to perhaps before the Levitical priesthood, that there's some priesthood role for that, okay?
Okay.
So as far as the firstlings of your flock and your herds and these kinds of things, those are set apart to him, but he allows you to partake of those in, what you read in Deuteronomy 15, but it had to be brought to the place that he said his name, which would be the temple, right?
Agreed.
So then what you're connecting that to then is when they brought the Pesach lamb for their family. Would that have been from among their firstborn of their flock? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I would say it had to be a male lamb of the first year, right? With no spots or blemish. So that would insinuate that it would have been from among, the first or the firstlings of the flock. That would insinuate that. However, what happens when the firstling of the flock has a blemish? What are you going to do at Pesach?
Agreed, because it even tells you in 15 that you eat it within your gates if it has a blemish or defect or blind or something along those lines.
So I guess what I'm trying to, and I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just trying to think this through.
Oh, I got you.
You can set your firstling of the flock apart, and that's his. But when you bring that Pesach for your family, it has to be without any imperfections, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can just see that there's the possibility of some scenario where the firstlings of your flock, there might be some imperfections among them, which would, in my view, disqualify it from bringing it as the Pesach.
Yeah, because
So
it
how do
wouldn't
you
be a clean
accommodate for
offering at that point.
Yeah. So back to your question, is as far as this part of it, were those firstlings so that they could bring them to the temple for these specific holy days, Pesach being one of them? That was kind of part of your question anyway,
Yes.
right? Okay. I don't see that that's negated necessarily, but I'm just saying that there could be a situation if you've got the firstling of your flock and they've got, imperfections, the Pesach lamb has to be without those imperfections. So
And if your firstling is imperfected, then how would you have an offering for Passover?
that's my question. So that's why I was trying to track with you, make sure I understood. So I think it's possible that they could have been for that, but I also see that there's a possibility that if they had an imperfection, then what do? You have to find a lamb of the first year that has no imperfections.
Right.
All right? All right, did we respond to your question or
Yeah,
address
definitely.
it? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Whew. All righty. Why is it not okay for Israel? Wait a minute. Okay, why is it not okay for Israel to eat meat that has died of itself, yet it's okay to sell to foreigners? Well, I could speculate. Only thing I've ever thought of in this regard is, God demands more of his children than he does of somebody else's children. God demands more of his people than he does the nations. So there's just a certain standard that we have to, or we're expected to live up to, that he doesn't necessarily place upon the nations. Now, that being said, we're supposed to be an example to the nations. So my thoughts are, and I'm not going to be dogmatic about it, but my thoughts are, it's because he doesn't place the same expectations on the nations as he does us. And yet, the call that is upon his people is to be a light to those nations so that they will come out from among the nations and be part of his family, which then would put them in another situation when it comes to meat that is died of itself. So, anyway. You got something better than that, Holsty? But do you have a thought on the matter? I need a microphone over here for Mr. Holsty, real quick. I'll come back to whoever had it. Sorry about that. I just saw this look on your face.
To your point of expecting more from your own children, I think this may be a matter of Kedusha. There's a higher level of holiness depending on how far up the ladder you go. The priesthood were expected to have a higher level of holiness than general population. The high priest had a lot higher holiness there. The camp of Israel had an expectation of them that wasn't for the rest of the world. So I think it's just, if you're a Ger or no Cree, you need to make that citizenship choice. Are you Israel?
There you go. Right. So that's about them coming out of those nations to be part of this family, right? So we're on the same page. I think so. Makes me feel a lot better about my answer. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Well, okay, so eat an apple a day, keep the doctor away.
My doctor
can't-
says I can't eat apples right now because they have too much sugar.
Yeah, I hear
Playing.
that.
Go ahead.
But you can't just like skip doing that all month and then eat 30 apples before the appointment. So I kind of feel like it's like if I come to, when I come to Sabbath and visit all of you and we come together to be with God, how could I be ready for that if I was bickering with my family all week, yelling at my kids, and I don't know, watching all the bad things I shouldn't watch, and then coming here and expecting to bring a good offering? So I just kind of feel like it's a heart issue. All these things are heart issues. Am I preparing all year to be ready for him? And if I am, then my sheep know my voice, he says. I'm going to know his voice. And I'm going to hear what to do in each situation, I think. So I just feel like it's about how in tune we're being. How in tune are we trying to be with him? That's all.
Appreciate that. Well, I do want to go back to something you said, though. Without raising your hands, how many of you have found that there are some Shabbat mornings when life happens and it's just a struggle to even give? Yeah, so without raising your hands, okay? So you need to follow instructions, everybody. But in all seriousness, you know, it seems like everything wants to blow up right before you're supposed to come here. You know, why is that? Now when I grew up in the Pentecostal church, that was the devil. The devil did this. The devil gave me a flat tire this morning coming to church. The devil gave, this, that, and the other. But then sometimes I think it's not so much the adversary. Sometimes life happens, but sometimes God allows life to happen to give us opportunity to demonstrate what's really in our heart. And giving up is not what it's supposed to render. It's perseverance. We have to choose to serve God in spite of what's going on in life. We have to choose to worship God in spite of what's going on in life. One of my worst problems as a person is when I'm mad and furious or whatever it is and upset, it's very hard for me to pray. Because it's very hard for me to want to pray, because how can I pray to you when I'm ready to rip somebody's throat out? That might be a little graphic, but anyway. Just a little. Okay, well, it's not like you've never felt that way before. It was an exaggeration. You don't explain it as graphic. But everybody here knows what I'm talking about, because everybody's like, yeah, that's right, But it's hard for me to want to pray because I feel like I can't pray right now. But yet, what is my option? To give in to my anger, and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, we do need to prepare. We do. I think when we come together, hopefully anyway, it's going to be more of a celebration. Yeah, there's encouragement, there's support, and there's all those kinds of things, but it should be, a celebration. But sometimes we just have to choose to do that in spite of life. I've told you many times, Beth and I have had conversations that have broken out on Shabbat morning, or they're a holdover from Friday night. That happens too. And, we've just kind of told one another, before we step on this platform, we got to work this out, and that's kind of just making a choice. So my point is that, yes, we do need to prepare, and sometimes that preparation means choosing to do in spite of everything else that's happened, because life is going to continue to unfold. What was that? That was a lyric about life is what happens when you're busy making plans, you know? And sometimes God allows life to happen to see what's really in our heart. Are we going to choose to persevere? Anyway, I'm rambling now.
I really appreciate all of that. And I appreciate everyone's honesty, because we call that the Friday night trap. If right before Shabbat.
The Friday night trout?
I'm sorry.
Trap.
The
Okay, all right.
braces. I'm
Okay.
tired of talking today. My gosh. I love talking to all of you. No, the Friday night trap. It's the enemy uses the same card. He's like, I'm going to throw this one out at you. And I don't know. If we're not paying attention, we can get duped. And before we know it, we didn't even celebrate Shabbat. I mean, I'm not saying that happens every Friday at our house or anything, but I'm just saying that when I learn to pass the test, I know that there's going to be a bigger test, but I guess I wouldn't have it any other way, because I rather know what's in my heart right now. So that when I come here and someone says, how are you? I'm good, thank you. How was your week? It was good. I don't need to give every single thing of how my week was. I ran into things all week. I'm sure everyone else here did too. So I'm just trying to balance listening to his voice and hearing when I go throughout the week, so that when Friday comes, I don't fall for that trap that's coming. I know the enemy's going to use the same tricks, and I just want to pass the test. So.
Well, I do think that, the enemy will try some things, and on specific days. It used to be, and maybe to some degree still is, but for us, especially starting out in this walk, when we found out what Passover was all about, every year when we tried to observe Passover and have a Seder, every year there was something just blowing up right before that. I remember that one time we had, it was Nathan, right? We were trying to sit down. It was just our family do the Seder with a couple of friends. And, all of a sudden Nathan's got a raging fever. Yeah, it was really, really high. And, so there's the consternation that comes with that, and trying to do, yeah, that happens. But then, we just have to choose to persevere in those kinds of situations. And I'll go back to something I said earlier. And when the mechanics of what we're trying to do in order to please him don't always turn out the way we'd like to, I choose to believe that his Father's heart looks upon that, their heart is to do these things. And he's going to give us grace, and he's going to give us instruction, and because he's long-suffering, he works with us because he wants us to be shaped and molded into that ultimate image of the Son of Man. So. And to come here together and to encourage one another and support one another as part of what we do as a community. So,
Amen.
All right? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Bill.
Yes, hello, Bill. It's good to see you all again. The first note I took on your message this morning was there's an inherent blessing in obeying God's commandments, likewise an inherent curse in disobedience. Recently, I read a message from another Bible teacher. He's not Messianic, but he talked about the happiness meter, and that if we obey God, our happiness meter increases. If we disobey, it decreases. But the main point of his teaching was that that's not a correct motivation to obey the Lord. He said the proper motivation was because he is the Lord and we are his servants, regardless of how happy we might become by obeying. But could you comment on that, about the motivation for obeying?
Well, I agree. Our motivation should be because he said so. And our heart should be that because we love him, we are motivated to do it, not because we feel like we're coerced or, there's a threat attached to it if we don't, but because we want to. In Psalm 40, David writes it, but I believe he's quoting the Messiah who's saying it. I delight to do your will, oh my God, and your Torah is in my heart. So it should be a delight. It's not always convenient, because convenience is going to soothe the flesh. That's what I mean by that. So obedience is very inconvenient to the flesh, to my will. But we're supposed to strive to be the kind of people who are ready and willing to surrender our will to whatever our King wishes for us to do. And so we should be motivated by delight, a will to please him, a desire to please him, because we love him. If you love me, keep my commandments. Not motivated by, if I do this, then I get a reward at the end. Which is kind of why I said something this morning along these lines. We're to serve him, we're to fear him, we're to love him, whether or not he does anything else miraculous in our lives. Whether or not there's another quote unquote reward, we should do it because we love him, we fear him, we want to serve him. So I absolutely agree with that. In terms of happiness, Paul said he'd learned to be content. And I found that very interesting that he didn't use the word happy. He used the word content, that he had learned to be content in whatever his circumstance is, whether it's good, whether it's not so good. He had learned to be content with that. And so, that just several years ago just really struck a chord in me, that I'm not certain that he's expecting me to be happy all the time, but I am pretty confident that he expects us to be content, to learn how to be content, whether we're in trial or whether we're in, some, jubilation over some, a victory, but to be content in those situations. As far as happiness, well, Psalm 1, it says blessed is the man, but the word also means happy. Happy is the man who does what? He doesn't listen to the wicked and the scornful, but his thoughts are on the word of the Lord all these days. He's like that tree that's planted by the rivers of water whose leaf doesn't wither, and whatever he does, it prospers. And that's the kind of man or woman that learns to be even beyond content, but to be happy, to consider themselves blessed. But why? It's because their motivation is everything to do with what pleases him.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, so can you explain discernment? Is it a gift, and can everyone have it? Thank you to Maureen for praying for us. Was that supposed to be Marlene? Okay, thank you. It says thank you to Maureen for praying for us during the hurricane in Houston. We are grateful. So I don't know who Maureen is, but I'm thinking Marlene. Okay, anyway. Explain discernment. To articulate that. Is it a gift? I do believe it is a gift, yes. I think it is something that by the Spirit of God we can have discernment. Is it something that can be learned? I think as we grow in the Word, as we grow in the Lord, that our discernment can be intensified, it can increase. But ultimately, I do believe it is a gift. And here's why. Because there was a time in my life I didn't have it. Didn't have it. I mean, there could have been chairs floating in the room and I wouldn't have noticed. But that became a problem. And so Beth and I both prayed that I would get discernment. And we believe he answered that prayer, don't we? So yeah, I do believe it's a gift. But can everyone have it? Yeah, I believe that God wants us to be discerning. We need to be discerning. If we're not discerning, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So yes, I do believe that every believer can have it, should pray for it. If you don't feel like you have it, pray harder. For me, discernment kind of goes hand in glove with wisdom. And so there's a process here. There has to be knowledge. Without knowledge, the people perish, right? but there has to be knowledge, but there also has to be understanding. And understanding, according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 2, this is the Spirit of God who gives us understanding. He's the one who searches out, yes, all the deep things of God. It's by the Spirit that we obtain understanding. But then understanding leads to wisdom, the ability to appropriate what we have understood to our lives and how we walk. And so as we appropriate the God-given wisdom, and if any man lacks wisdom, what should he do? Ask, right? Then God will give it to him. That's what it says. And so when we are given that wisdom and to appropriate what we understand to our lives, discernment kind of goes hand in glove with that, because wisdom will say, do this, don't do that, don't do this now, do this, those kinds of things. And you have to be discerning of the circumstances and the scenario that you find yourself in. And so to me, it is tied to that wisdom that comes from the Father. So all of that is to say, I believe it's a gift. I believe it's of the Spirit. The Word has to be part of that too, because we have to know what the Word says very intimately to have the wisdom to appropriate these things to our lives. Daniel is someone, I think, that was greatly discerning, and part of that, or in large part, due to the Spirit of God that worked in the man's life, which led into other things, discerning dreams and being able to interpret different things, which is a little bit more down the road. But without discernment, how are we as God's people going to be able to navigate these days in which the Messiah himself said are going to be very deceptive? So anyway, where am I? No one? All right, Leviticus 17. And does this have anything to do with the Torah portion? I'm trying to stay with the Torah portion best I can right now. All right, 17:15. Oh, okay. Every soul that eats that which dies of itself, or that which is torn of beasts, whether he be homeborn or a stranger, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water and be unclean until the evening, then he shall be clean. Okay, the first thing that jumps out here is that, there were people who were strangers among the congregation. So if we're going where I think you're going, I think that this Leviticus 17:15 is pertaining to those people who were strangers, who were not homeborn, but who were part of the congregation in the wilderness. And so there were certain things that applied to them as well, being that they were part of the community there in the wilderness. But we'll go over and read in Deuteronomy 14. Would you agree with that, sir? Okay. Right. That's what I thought. So in Deuteronomy 14:21. I think that's the distinction there. That when they were in the wilderness, there were people who came out of Egypt with them who were not homeborn. But what we just read in Leviticus and other instructions, they were expected to pertain by those same instructions while they were in the wilderness. So that would be, I believe, the distinction. So, anyone else have anything they'd like to share? All right, yeah, so streamers, if you do have a question, you need to put a big red question mark in front of it so that the team back there can identify it, because there's a lot of things that come up, and they're doing a lot of things back there, and so they need that help putting that big red question mark there so that they can identify your questions. Sometimes, I'll go back and read some of the comments. My question didn't get asked. Well, first of all, a lot of questions come in, but the guys in the back do a great job every week. Need some help. Anyway, so that red question mark can help. What? In YouTube, that's right. That's specifying not on the app, but in YouTube. All right. All righty. So, sir.
Yes, sir. I come from a Pentecostal background. Muchly, it was a lot of confusion when I was when I first got saved. And And now, that I've learned a lot. And I like your answers and the discussions we have and about discernment. And there's also, from my experience, not always something I wanted to happen, but, discerning the spirits, you can pray for it. And this minister mentioned that you can actually see what spirit, and sometimes you can just obviously see it. It's just, you don't even have to see it visually, but sometimes you can. And I had an incident where I'm not married now, but there's this person. And all of a sudden, I just come out of this person's head. It's like a snake, and it divided into three. And I'm thinking, at the time, I know it sounds really way there, but I didn't want to see it because I knew what it meant. But I did, at least it let me know what. And but there's been times I've seen things, and a lot of times you just don't want to see what you see. And sometimes it's not as scary. Sometimes you see things, but if you pray for the discerning of the spirits, you will start seeing things, and you won't always like what you see. But sometimes, like I said, it's not as scary as what you think it would be, but it's not of God or whether it's of God. Mostly it's to know what spirit is involved with whatever you or someone else is going through. And I liked what the sister brought up about, like these Friday night, whatever things happening, because I've always been scared to get very angry or angry at all. But Jesus said, be angry and sin not, or whoever it said, right? Paul, whoever, I can't remember. But
It was Paul, yes.
yes. But I had found something out, and it even scared me, because I do believe I have the baptism of the Holy Ghost, but we have to be very careful what spirit we are of. But I found that, in this be angry and sin not thing, when I know I'm not sinning, but I am angry, sometimes praying in the spirit, which is with another, whatever language that God gives me, sometimes it seems to come out fluently, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, is that supposed to happen when I'm angry? I'm thinking, am I sinning? What's going on here? So I have to be very careful that whether it's discerning of spirits or whatever, that I'm not getting over into the flesh. But I have found that praying in that instance to try to keep the love, even though I am very angry at times, try to keep the love. But my thinking starts to become much clearer than what I thought it would be. And where I avoid getting over into the sin part of it. And that's all I wanted to say, but it's very important. I think if the church needs anything, it needs the discerning of spirits, because a lot of people are deceived. They just will get veered off into anything that comes along, and without that, you don't know what you're doing. Sometimes you just have to run from things. I wanted to say something about an incident that I had. And I told a manager that I was going to tell the church, not just this church, but everybody. I said, I'm not even going to go on the social media about it. But because of the messages on my car, someone worked at a certain place, confronted me, but while they were apparently they looked like they were working. They laid in wait for me, to confront me or say something about my anti-LGBTQ message.
And you told us this story.
No, but this was a new one. This was a new one.
Oh, new one.
So it's like they lay in wait, and it's almost like as if they're stalking you, right? Or stalking you. And I just told her, I don't want to argue. But she kept on and wanted to preach a little bit. And there was something about, she tried to quote something from Romans. So I just said, Romans 9:13. Jacob I love, Esau I hated. Trying to give her an example, but I know where she was coming from, but I just couldn't pinpoint it at the time. And like I said, I'd already told her I don't want to argue with her, so I'm going around and getting in my car. And the girl said, that's because she just kept going on. And I pointed and said, is the message on my car, is it correct? And I had to repeat myself so she would answered me and she said, no. Well, I said, and I wasn't trying to be mean, but I know what I was dealing with at the same time. I just bluntly said, well, then get away from me. I don't want to deal with your devil spirit. And I got in my car, closed my door, and she's still going on. I could hear her talking. So I go to the manager the next day and I tell him, about what happened. He was shocked that apparently she was representing the store, but still waiting on some Christians so she can pick on them. So I told him, I said, I just want you to fire her. But I just want to know that he's actually going to do something. Because what we are finding in our communities, they're using that Protection of Marriage Act as a backdoor to take away our First Amendment right. They're wanting to say anything they want, but we're not supposed to be able to say anything. And the message is on my car because I saw a fifth grader start bragging about how he was so happy he was gay. And I'm thinking, that ain't right. If they can say things, because a lot of people are just doing it because they're ignorant, but people get angry about it simply because it's a spiritual matter. It's not because, that they know what the truth is. They've been taught wrong, but we've too long, and I've said enough, but I don't want to make this complicated, but about this being angry, sometimes we have to get angry.
Well, it's not a sin to be angry.
No.
It's what you do with that anger.
Yeah. And I was thinking, we just preaching about, or not preaching, you weren't preaching, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. But you were talking earlier today, and it made me think, Jesus did not go about, I bet he didn't go and say, oh, you little hypocrites. I bet he was really angry, but he's got his love. He did it for a good reason.
Well, as far as his anger, he would get angry. He got a bunch of cords and chased a bunch of people out of his father's house. He was angry. But most of the time, it seems to me anyway, that when he was angry and when he got in somebody's face, it was with people who knew better and who actually claimed to represent him, not necessarily people who were of the world who didn't claim to represent him. So that's one thing. But anger is in and of itself is not a sin. The Bible describes God being angry, right? It's what we do with that anger and how we act it out and what we do have to be very careful even of ourselves and to discern what spirit we're of when we encounter these people. There's an account when Messiah set his face to go up to Jerusalem, and he was going to go into Samaria, and he's sent emissaries in, but they wouldn't have him because he was determined to go up to Jerusalem. And so he had two disciples who said, do you want us to call fire down on these people and consume them like Elijah did? He turned to him and says, you don't know what spirit you're of. I didn't come to destroy people, I came to save them. So when it comes to discerning the spirits, we also have to apply that to ourselves as well. We have to discern what spirit we're of. Are we in the flesh? And there are some things that would be very easy to provoke me to get in my flesh, but we have to discipline ourselves in that regard. As far as discerning the spirits, I have never, ever seen anything otherworldly or, some vision or whatever you want to call it when, I've encountered somebody who was of some kind of a different spirit. It's always been there's a reaction, there's a response. You see it in their face, you hear it in their words, you see it in their attitude. And so, we do have to test the spirits to see if they be of God. We have to be able to discern what we're dealing with. And I believe that the more of the Spirit of God that is in us, which means the less of our flesh and our will, and that's in us, the easier probably isn't the proper word, but the more discerning we will become of these things. And then know how to appropriately address them. And so, as I said this morning, I don't think we should go out there and poke our finger in somebody's eye to try to provoke a confrontation. I'm not going to do that. But at the same time, we do need to be willing, able, and ready to stand on the truth, for the truth, in the truth, but always leave an impression that we've done what the Messiah would have done and we did it the way he would be pleased with, and not get in our flesh. with those kinds of things, to be very careful about that. So, so I'll tell you this story. A friend of mine from long ago, Flint Holly, told me this story. He used to go to the Bible school that Swaggart had over in Baton Rouge back in the day. This would be back in the 80s. And they used to have this, big meeting they called Crossfire, I think. And does that sound right? Okay. So he says, all these young people that go into college, and this, it's a Pentecostal thing, and they're worshiping and they're praising and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, this young guy says, "Yea, I say unto thee." Everybody listens. And he goes, "Yea, I say unto thee." Everybody's still waiting. He says, "Yea, I say," "Oh, I'm in the flesh." So it can't happen. Let's be careful. What is Matthew 24 explaining? That's a very broad question. Which part of it? Okay. If we have time at the end, we may come back to that. Where am I? Mr. Kyle.
Sir.
Sir. I'm not laughing at you.
It's okay.
I think Garrett must be in the back today. All right, go ahead.
So I was kind of expounding, kind of listening to some of the questions and thoughts, and going back to Ephesians 4:14.
Okay.
Is it childish of us to think that we serve a king and that we should expect blessings? Is it childish of us to read the scriptures and think that we have to pertain knowledge? Like you had the question that you said, I don't think it's going to be solved on this side of the heaven. Is it childish of us when we come to these things and we build dissent because of, I guess, trying to gather a deeper understanding sometimes that maybe not be ours to understand? And like little children, I think we need to just come with an awe of the Father into this sanctuary, into this presence, and just be thankful, like little children, that He loves us. And everything that comes out of that is just a blessing. But we don't come expecting it. Like our children don't come to us and do things for us because they expect us to love them. They just know that we love them. And so I was just kind of reflecting on that verse today, and that's just kind of what hit me. And also, like with, going back to Isaiah 20 or 8:20, where it's talking, and it kind of got into the listening to other teachers that don't follow what we do. There's some great wisdom I've learned from Christian teachers that I would agree with that. Have never heard out of any other Messianic teacher. But I think we look at it with if it contradicts with what we know, then we take and we glimmer what we can out of it that's good, and we throw the rest of it away. We don't let it influence us. But the thought that was just coming to me this morning, I was sharing with somebody after Oneg, was, do we show our children that when we come here, are we expecting to be in the presence of the King? Are we expecting to be in His courts, ready to worship, ready to praise, ready to receive what He has maybe given you or whoever is speaking? Are we coming and are we teaching that? And why aren't we grasping more of that? Why aren't we having that mindset more of, other than just coming, yeah, it's great here to see you guys, it's great here to hug everybody. But why are we not focusing on, we're coming to be in the presence of the King? A king. Not the greatest king, I'm sorry. But it's with that reverence and that childlike faith we would come. It's like, we'd come in like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And that's just the thought I was reflecting on when you hit on that verse. And as I was listening to some of the questions and stuff, that's just kind of the thought that came to me. And I did have a question.
Okay.
If I may.
You may.
Deuteronomy 15:1-5 when it talks about the sabbatical year, a kind of thought that I've always had is these people were living in community all the time. And like you're talking, they're living tent rows away from each other, blocks away from each other, but they're all living within community all the time. And I wonder if some of this was because the father didn't want to create dissension within his flock. So he created ways for them to give forgiveness and to help each other build and grow the community. And that was just a thought process I possibly had looking into that.
Well, I mean, what's the command that's like to the first?
Love your brother.
Love your neighbor as yourself, right? So there's all these different ways or methods, embedded in all these different commands that is always going to support that and provoke that. Love God, love your neighbor. So whether it's, the year of release or all these other things, So, yeah. Messiah said that everything in the Torah and the prophets hangs on those two, right? So obviously it's about building community. It's about building relationship this way and relationship this way. So did I respond to your question?
I think so. I'm just trying to, that's a thought process I've just been kind of wrestling with and also where, you said it eloquently today too, it's where's our heart? What is our heart? When you ask for offering, during the service, you always say, if you've prepared and have a willing heart. And I think in all of this, the Father is looking at us and saying, where's your heart? Is your heart towards me? Or is your heart towards trying to get the checkbox or get the knowledge or get whatever and make sure you're doing everything right? Or is your heart and desire really just to follow me? And if I give you, like you said, if he gives us a blessing, he gives us a blessing. If he doesn't, he doesn't. That's not for us to decide. That's for him.
Well, as I said, I do believe there is a blessing. There are inherent blessings in just doing what he said to do. That might look different than what we might have imagined the blessing looking like, but nonetheless, there's a blessing in all of these things that he tells us to do, and we would do them. And without experiencing them, you can talk about them all day. You can teach about them all your life, but until you actually do them, I don't think you really experience the blessing that's there because you have to do, all right? So I do believe he blesses us, is my point. I believe that it's embedded in these things that he tells us to do when we actually do them. Is there a reward beyond that? That gets into, if he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I'm still going to do these things because he's asked me to do them, and that's what's pleasing to him. And so, yeah, it is. It's always been and always will be. What is the motivation of our heart? And I will add this. The people who are doing it, check all the boxes, are going to get weeded out. I'm not going to do that. He's going to orchestrate circumstances to weed all that stuff that's, not motivated by a desire to serve him, not motivated by a heart that wants to please him. All that gets weeded out. He has a way. All right. Is that it?
That's good. We're good.
Thank you, sir. I just glanced at that real quick, and I thought it said Raquel Welch, and I'm like, what? So it's Russell Welch. It was just a glance, all right. All right, Leviticus 17:21 has different instructions from Deuteronomy 14:21 for the native-born versus the foreign. We just did that just a few questions ago. Am I not right? So refer to that. Same question. You'll have to find another one. Who has the microphone?
I do, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hey, really quick question. 1 John 4, you're talking about discernment. It says test the spirits. And whichever spirit confesses, Yeshua is Messiah or Jesus is the Christ. And there are so many teachers out there, but a lot of them have very false teachings, but they appear to confess that at first, at least. So is there some extra context to that or extra layers to that? Because, obviously if someone said he's not, he would know, but there are so many people out there that seem to have spirits, but also claim to be Christian or Messianic to some level. Thank you.
So your question is, or was that just an observation?
Oh, it's a question. 1 John 4, is there like more context to that or more layers where it talks about not every spirit, well, you have to test the spirits and see if they believe Jesus is the Christ.
How do you know?
How do you know, like, is there an extra layer, extra context to that? Because
How do you know what kind of a tree it is?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
By what?
The fruit.
There's fruit. So if they say they're an orange tree and they produce lemons, they're lying.
So the saying is that they verbally say it, it's their life shows it. Their life says it.
Well, it's easy to say things.
Yes, sir.
Anybody can say it, but it's a difficult and a different thing to actually do it. And so you know them by their fruit. You don't know them necessarily by what they say.
Okay.
You know them by their fruit. If you didn't see the appropriate fruit growing in my life, you shouldn't be here.
So the confession isn't a verbal confession. The confession means is a
Well, I mean,
confession.
I think the verbal confession is important, yes. To speak and profess things is important, but it's not the all in all because it has to be backed up by doing. You have to see the fruit. You know them by their fruit. Messiah said in the last days that many will come in my name saying I am the Christ or I am the Messiah, but will deceive many. And so I don't believe that is him saying that many people were going to come claiming that they themselves are the Messiah. He's saying that there will be people who say that Yeshua is the Messiah, but who will deceive many. So how do they do that?
Exactly.
Because they teach things that are not true, or they teach things that are deceptive. That's what what Paul talked to Timothy about. They would not endure sound doctrine. They'll heap unto themselves teachers having itching ears, and they will turn away from the truth to be turned into fables. So Paul talks about that, Messiah talks about that, and if they talked about it and said it's going to happen in the end days, we should expect that would happen. So then, how are we going to be able to test the spirits to see if they be of God? We have to find the fruit. We have to be, we have to examine the fruit. Does the fruit match the seed being the word? And to be able to do that, we're going to have to know the word. And we're probably going to, no, not probably. We need to be full of the Spirit of God, who is the Spirit of truth. Because the adversary is good at what he does. He's been at it a long time. And so just me trying to use my intellect to go up against the adversary, I'm going to lose every time. I need the Spirit of God. I need to be well grounded in the Word of God to be able to see these things, to know what fruit to be looking for. So that would be my understanding of what John said as far as testing the spirits to see if they be of God. And, people can say that they believe Yeshua is the Messiah, and they can live a life that says something else. There are people who are going to stand before him and say, did we not cast out devils in your name, prophesy in your name, do other wonderful works in your name? But what did he say? I don't know you. So there has to be that intimacy, that relationship with him that would be evident in the fruit that they produce in their lives.
So the confession is not just the verbal confession, is their life shows it, their life confesses it.
Well, yeah. And over time, fruit that remains. Not just, something that pops up and disappears. Fruit that remains, an abundance of it. It should not be, I shouldn't have to guess. Really, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It should be very obvious. And yet, many are going to be deceived, according to what we read. And why? Is the problem with the person who's doing the deceiving, or is the problem with the person who's being deceived?
Thank you. It's a big thing going around where someone sees in the mission statement, they said they believe, or this teacher said they believe. So anything they say after that, it's golden. They just like
I didn't understand that.
There's
I'm sorry.
a lot going around culturally of, like in the Christian community, there's a church mission statement says they believe, or statement of faith, or this preacher or pastor, whoever said they believe. And then after that, it's like a free pass. It's like, well, they're believers, so they have to have the Spirit of Yahweh because they said they did. They said they believed. They confessed Jesus is the Messiah. And after that, there's no more questions. So I was hashing that out. And I was curious about it too. Thank you. It's a very thorough answer.
Well, I hope I answered your question.
You did very well. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Sir?
All right. Do you have any insights into the importance of the blood, not ingesting it and pouring it onto the ground when you slaughter an animal? Do I have any insights into the importance of the blood, not ingesting it Well, the life of all flesh is in the blood. And so blood is considered to be sacred in that I have given it to you as an atonement for your souls. I believe that's what Leviticus 17 says, or words to that effect. So blood is sacred. And so when, blood is, well, if it's used or appropriated or utilized for anything outside of what Scripture says, because he's the one who can define the parameters, I'm not. And so if blood is used within the parameters that he's established, he says that's okay. But if it's used for any other reason outside of that, it's wrong. So I don't really have any insight into it other than the life of flesh is in the blood. Blood is, in that regard, synonymous with life. And we need to be very careful about how we handle life. Anyway. Where am I?
Over here.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
I recognize that voice.
Yeah, so if someone says they're an orange tree and they produce lemons, does that mean they're liming? Sorry.
All right, enough with the slurs, John. No, just playing.
To go with the discernment thing, I think there's a godly discernment where the word and wisdom come together, but I also think that there is, in a sense, a different sense of that with the gift of discernment, where you don't necessarily understand anything else about the situation or the person, but the Spirit gives you the discernment of the truth of the heart of the matter, so to speak, without understanding anything else about it. And anyway, I just thought they'd throw that out there.
And sometimes that renders a word of knowledge.
Yes, yes. So I have a comment or I guess, partial question. In Luke 14, let me see if I find it here. Verse 26, Yeshua says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple." And then also in Matthew 10, I'll go ahead and read 34 as well. Yeshua also says, "Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword, for I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." I just want to go back to Deuteronomy 13, where he says, 13 verse 8, right? Sorry, verse 6. "If your brother, the son of your mother, your son or your daughter, the wife of your brother, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul, secretly entices you, saying, 'Let us go and serve other gods which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, or of the gods of the people which are all around you, near you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not consent to him, nor listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him. But you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage.'" So my comment or question is, do you think this passage here in Deuteronomy is where Yeshua got the thought of what he said, if you don't hate your mother or father, or basically put me first before all of them?
If he didn't, I don't know where else he would have gotten it.
Because I never put those two together until today. And I always saw that I always understood, I guess, that if you don't hate your mother and father as meaning you have to put Yeshua first before them. But I guess to me this kind of clarified, in a sense, how much more you have to put Yeshua and his word before those around you whom you love. And you can't allow them to dissuade you from doing what God has called you to do or following him.
What was the command given to Abram?
To Abel?
To Abram.
Oh, to Abram.
Before he was Abraham.
Yeah, leave your father and
leave your country,
household,
leave your family, leave your father's household.
Yeah.
You know, and I read into that. If he had not been willing to do that and had not done that, then something about that country, that family, and his father's house would have influenced him in a way that he would not have fulfilled what God had ordained him to be. So there are situations where family members, blood kin, can be the biggest opponent, impediment, obstacle for us to overcome. Not all the time, hopefully very rarely, but it does happen. And even those kinds of relationships should not get in the way of us following God with all of our heart. So yeah, I think that at least that concept is what Yeshua is obviously referring to, that he has to be first, that God has to be first before all of that. Because who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Those who keep the commandments of my Father. Right?
Yeah, okay. That's it.
Was that it?
Yes, that was it.
I was expecting more.
I'm sorry, I'll have to work something up next time.
See if you can find something that's going to be more topical back there. Thank you. Okay, I'll answer this one real quick. For someone who doesn't know or speak Hebrew as yourself, what Bible would you recommend I use? Well, one that's not in Hebrew. No, I'm playing. My wife has a Bible. Let me see that real quick, Beth. Yes. Okay. My wife has a Bible. Actually, this was given to me many years ago. My dear lady, who she lived in Israel part-time and she lived in Florida the rest of the time. She was very fluent in Hebrew, and so she would just seems magically show up at different events that I'd be speaking at. She'd just be back in the back of the room. I'd see her and go, oh, I got to really be on my P's and Q's here tonight. Anyway, she gave me this Bible many years ago, but it's just, it's called the Holy Scriptures, and it's in Hebrew and in English. So I'm assuming you're asking the question that if you're wanting to kind of get into understanding things a little bit more Hebraic, perhaps, but you don't read Hebrew or speak Hebrew, this is a pretty good Bible, and it has the New Testament in it as well, in Hebrew. So I would recommend that if you're going to go that far, that you start learning some of the basics of Hebrew so that you can start identifying some words and such, but you have the English text here so that you'll actually understand what's going on. Other than that, whichever one you can understand the best. So, anyway, where am I? Yes, sir.
Well, I would recommend checking out the International School of the Word and taking a course by a familiar gentleman in terms of Hebrew. I don't get enough of you here on Saturdays.
So you have to go to ISO.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I do.
All right. Well, that is true. They do have a lot of different courses on ISO that get into Hebrew language and Hebrew custom, and the guy's name escapes me at the moment, but that's not important anyway. So.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a following. So I don't know. Hopefully this ties back to the portion, and you won't hate me for it. So the context of, I guess to put this question in context, I think it's safe to say that Hasatan, the enemy, Satan, whatever, basically his biggest desire is to be worshipped instead of Yah. I mean, fair? I mean, pretty basic, right? Okay. So Revelation 22, chapter 22, verse 8. So John basically is talking about, hey, I saw and heard these things, and when I heard them, I fell down to worship before the feet of the messenger who showed me these matters. And he said to me, do not, for I'm a fellow servant and of your brothers, the prophets, and of those who, regarding the words of this book, worship Elohim. So basically immediately turned, shut that down, right? And pointed him to worship where the worship was due. I didn't really know until I was listening to your commentary, until you were talking earlier today. I totally glossed over the part of Saul prophesying. But there in First Samuel 28, I always wondered about basically when Saul goes and has the lady conjure the ghost of Samuel. I may be misreading the words there, but first thing that always caught my attention about that is first, whenever the ghost of Samuel appears, like the woman seems to freak out. So I always kind of wondered if she was a bit of a fraud.
I think you're right.
But there is in verse 14, it says, Saul knew it was Samuel, so he bowed down low. Is this really Samuel, or is this potentially a demonic spirit? I kind of assume it's really Samuel, because, he basically tells him exactly what's going to happen. I would think that the enemy would probably try to say or do something different. But the bowed down low part always threw me. And I wondered if, Samuel never, if it's bowing down low in like a way of worship, the quote ghost of Samuel never tells him, hey, stop, fool. I'm not the guy, you got it wrong.
His foolishness has already been exposed. But
Well,
anyway.
Okay. So
you're asking about him bowing down?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, is that in a form of worship? Is this really Samuel? Is this...
All right. Well, let's see. How can we weave this into the Torah portion?
Well, you went into discernment and spirits.
Okay, there you go.
That's how...
I think that if it were not Samuel, that the Bible would have explained that. Yeah. Why would it leave us thinking that it was Samuel if it wasn't? I'd have a little problem with that. Yeah. I'm not, and again, I'm not going to be dogmatic about that. That's just my thought process. But as far as the bowing down, when Jacob had to confront Esau, he went over the river and he sent all of these gifts before him. And when he saw his brother Esau, do you remember what he did? He bowed down. Okay, did he bow down in an act of worship, or did he bow down as a demonstration of humility?
Humility.
And you can honor people without worshiping people, So I tend to think, and I've never really thought about it before, honestly, never really caught that myself. But I would say that this is more an expression of, he realizes that, this is Samuel. Samuel was a man of God. He was, an honorable man. And, Saul, obviously had a lot of respect for him, or he wouldn't have gone and broken his own law by going to the witch of Endor. Saul's the one who had all these witches run off and everything. But he breaks his own law, and because he's that desperate. Now, again, I don't think the bowing down is an act of worship. I think it's just he's honoring someone, that he considers to be an honorable man, just like Jacob, in an act of humility, he kind of bowed himself before Esau, but not in an expression of worship. So that's just my thoughts. But we'll go into the kingdom wondering if it's Samuel or something else.
No, I'll have bigger questions than that. Hopefully.
Well, I do too, but I'll eventually get to things like that, All right.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That was it.
All right, thank you. Does Deuteronomy 15:23 tie into Yeshua being pierced with the spear on the cross? Only shall not eat the blood thereof, you shall pour it out upon the ground as water. I don't think so. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I could be wrong, and I understand why you're asking, but I don't think it has any connection to that. At least if it does, I don't see it. And somebody smarter than me would have to show me the connection there. So, anyone else? Where is the mic? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you over there.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
This is about the drinking the blood as well. This was the first time going through this portion that. That
I want to say something. Yeah.
Say hi. No. That it stuck out to me that it says, "Only be strong and do not eat the blood," and I thought, I don't need anyone to encourage me not to do that. But in their culture, the pagan religions, the part of their practice was to do that because it was supposed to give them that vitality and life from the one they were getting it from. And it says that you pour it on the ground like water. And I just thought of, taking the dust of the earth and creating Adam. And we're pouring that life back into where he brought life from in the beginning. And then putting it on the slaughter place too. But just realizing that he, kind of an acknowledgement that he is the life giver. It all comes from him.
Amen. And just a footnote, there is a culture even today, and it seems to be prevalent among young people, this vampire culture, where they actually do just what he says don't do. It's pretty. Anyone else? All of our young ones are coming in. We'll probably have room or time for one more. So when is Bill going to tell the hornet's nest story? Do what? Really, there's not a whole lot more to tell. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the story. I just got tickled, It was just the guy. It was just a guy talking about his dad. It was not my dad. It didn't happen to me. But anyway, the fact that his dad got into some hornets, and all he had to do was jump into a pool that was right there, but instead he ran right by it, got in his truck, and he went to Walmart. That's it. That's the story. He didn't jump in the pool. That was the story. So there really wasn't anything more to tell beyond that. And that seems like a good place to stop. No, Mr. Holstein, no, please, Mr. Holstein. Please, sir.
Okay, well, I had a thought on discernment, and I think it sort of ties into one of the first questions about the Haftorah and why Isaiah 53 isn't there.
Okay.
And this is Isaiah 30, 20, and 21, which says, though Yahweh gave you bread of adversity and water of affliction.
I'm sorry, let me catch up.
Okay.
Where, Isaiah what?
30, 20, and 21.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry.
No worries.
All right, go ahead.
So it begins, though Yahweh gave you bread of adversity and water of affliction, your teacher shall no longer be hidden, but your eyes shall see your teacher. So when the Haftorah was written during the Hasmonean period, Antiochus Epiphanes apparently did not want the Torah to be read, so the idea was, where can we find this information somewhere else? And I think it wasn't time yet, for the Messiah to present himself. That was another almost 200 years in the future. So there comes a point where the teacher is no longer hidden. And then when we have Yeshua, we have discernment. We see what his halakha looked like. We can see how he answered all these questions, what he did. So we have some discernment in his walk. And then when he left the earth, he said, I'm not going to let you twist in the wind, to paraphrase. I'm going to leave you the advocate, the Parakletos, who will lead you into all truth. This next verse, I wonder, and what your thoughts are. Your ears hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, wherever you turn to the right or whenever you turn to the left. Is that the spirit of discernment telling us the way?
Which is the spirit of truth leading us into all of truth, right? So that's, it kind of, like I said, it goes kind of hand in glove as far as I'm concerned. Chachma, wisdom, that to me is the spirit of God, right? Teaching us how we are to walk, when to walk, what to do, when not to do, all these kinds of things. And so discernment goes hand in glove with that. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a very literal way. I mean, as things proceed and we anticipate will get darker and darker, it's going to be very, very important for us to know his voice, to recognize his voice, when to turn to the right, when to turn to the left, in a very literal way. In fact, in some situations, it could be the difference between life and death. So yes, I absolutely believe that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All righty, we're still waiting on the quiver? All right. Well, here's what we're going to do. Are they having some weather, or are they just delayed? Sean, did you have your hand up? All right, well, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Sean is taller than you. I will go to Sean first. We'll go to Sean first, and then we'll come to you, okay? All right.
Is it on? Okay. Okay, two things. If the Father can use a donkey to speak, he can use the Witch of Endor as well. He can use any means he wants to get his point across.
Yes, he can.
I'll just make a quick statement. So my brother grew up completely heathen life. We had no relationship. We weren't close. I was close to my wife's family more than I was my own family in a lot of ways. The last 3.5 years of my brother's life, we actually formed a friendship for the first time in our lives. And before he passed away, he accepted the Lord for the first time since he was a teenager. So the reason I'm saying that is, like you said, Yeshua said, who is my mother, who is my brother? Those that do the will of my Father. My point in this is he can redeem those times, but my brother had to be at his lowest point. He had to be willing to have a relationship with his believing brother before it ever happened. So, yes, we should never just run away from a relationship, but there are times where it's got to be the right time to have that relationship. And when they're ready to do the will of the Father is when you can have that relationship with that individual sometimes. So that's my statement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And if you'll bring the mic to Elia here.
I just wanted quickly, the topic of consuming the blood or pouring it out. When I first got into this walk, I read everything I could get my hands on. And there was a rabbinical commentary on this that I came across one time that said they thought the reason for that, what that commandment was, that with consumption of blood, you would take on the life of an animal and get more and more beastly and more cold and antisocial to people. So, I don't know, get more murderous or whatever.
I think anybody who would do that is already acting animalistic.
You're right. Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I can see to some degree the logic.
Yeah.
But it seems to me somebody would do that's already behaving in a beastly manner. But it speaks to me anyway of having no regard for life. Because blood is the carrier of life. And if you're wanting to consume life in that regard, what does that say of you? You're a destroyer. You know, you're wanting to, you're of the adversaries. You know, you're the same kind of mentality and heart as the adversary. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy. So somebody would do something like that to ingest the carrier of life is acting in the same way. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, you know, the whole myth of vampires, you know, I mean, what is it associated with? Mm-hmm. It's associated with darkness. It's just, you know, it's everything that we're not supposed to be, you know. So
I always thought it a little nervy to presume that anyone here would know the reason God gave a commandment for anything. That's just me. I just thought it was kind of nervy of anybody, really, rabbi or not, to presume to know the reasons that God would give us commandments. Oh, you know, He said that because it's no more than opinion. You know.
I think there's some things that we do and can understand, but then there's some things I don't, and I just have to leave it. He said it. That's enough. You know. So. All right, so Oliver Quiver's back here. Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, you can do whatever you want to. So, in fact, when you do that, why don't you go ahead and pray, and we'll say bye to the live stream.
Okay, well, right quick, I wanted to share a praise report. As we were releasing the children, I think it was right after I asked if we would all be in prayer for someone who has been really battling and respiratory issues and so forth. The report is that they do feel like after the prayer that they are already breathing easier. And so I'm just praying that the Father will continue that process and that they feel like they're going to turn the corner this weekend. And I'm going to agree with them on that and just believe that that's going to happen. And we'll get to have this person come and give their praise report in person. But on that note, we do still have some families that are dealing with, especially the young ones, some of the respiratory stuff that's going around and the other things. And I know this time of year when, you know, a lot of people here homeschool, but there are some that are back in school in other ways. And it seems to be that the children do pass things around like that. And I know some families that are going through it for round 2. And my heart goes out to them because as a mom of 4, I know that it's hard when you have to stay home and you feel just so disconnected and you know, dad has to still go and do what dad has to do. I mean, somebody's got to feed the family, right? But the mom, my heart just goes out to them. And if you're a mom and you've been through it, you know what it's like. And maybe you're the dad who's been the one who's had to be cut off and stay home. And that's not necessarily the point. The point is we want our children healthy. We want everybody healthy. And so I want our prayer to be this week that we stomp this thing into the ground this week, the end, no more, it's done, it's over, we're finished with all of this nonsense. And then I want us to pray and hear the Father on the things that we can do to help boost our immune systems, starting with our children. And I know I'm no doctor, so I will not even pretend to try to prescribe anything. I can only speak from our family's experience. I know that coming off of sugar is one of the number one things to help boost your immune system. You know, somebody who knows the specifics more than I, when you eat sugar, it just zaps, takes down your immune system completely for a specific and long amount of time. You'd be surprised if I could remember the number. But there's that, and then getting proper rest. You know, if we stay up all hours and do whatever we do that keeps us up and we don't get proper rest, coupled with, you know, with the children, maybe not eating some of the things that we, you know, want them to eat or consuming too much of those yummy things. There's so many things that work in tandem, and those are 2 of the biggest ones. So babies don't hate Miss Beth right now, but I'm going to ask your mom and dad to just limit your sugar for a while. You know, have blueberries instead. They're so good for you. They're so yummy. And when mom and dad say go to bed, it's time to go to bed. And mom and dad, y'all go to bed too, okay? Let's all get well. And when I am speaking to me, I'm the number 1 night owl in my house. I'm the worst. It's terrible. I confess right now. You know, it's just poor Bill. That's where all his gray hairs come from, most of them. We have 4 kids. Anyway, let's pray in all seriousness. Let the Father show us. If we're asking him to bless us, let's be willing to do our part first. And ask him not just to show us, but us do what he shows us. If he's saying sugar needs to be out of your life, then do it. stick to it. If he's saying, quit staying up so late, then do it. Whatever the thing is that he's showing you. Because if we're asking him to make us healthy, then if he shows us something, we need to do it. Now, I am not saying those who have been sick, this is why you're sick. Please don't think that. I'm just saying there are things that we can do to boost our immune system. I know with the way that we have been eating lately, and it's not Bill's favorite way, but, and I'm not a foodie, so it doesn't bother me that much, but I definitely feel better. I feel stronger. I feel more clarity of mind, and we have eliminated sugar, except for that piece of birthday cake that I ate. So, but that's good for me. That's good for me because a birthday cake in the house means I'm probably going to be sick because I don't have any discipline. But this time I did. So if I can do it, y'all can certainly do it. So let's do it together. Let's encourage one another. I started eating this way because I wanted to encourage him. And I have received the benefits from seeing him feel better. And he wanted to lose some weight. He's done that. I am benefiting from how I feel. So if we can support each other in that way, encourage each other, don't condemn each other, but just encourage each other. We need to be well. We need our whole army well because we're only as strong as our weakest member. And so let's just encourage each other and let's do that. During this week, pray for yourself that the Father will show you, even if you are healthy and have been all year long, what can I do to continue to strengthen my immune system? What do I need to cut out? What do I need to change? And let's do it now. And then pray for your neighbors and pray for the moms that are staying home. Little ones just get stuff. They don't know the rules about keep the fingers out of the holes in your face, So help the parents, pray for them who are dealing with that because, things happen. Okay? Anyway. I'm not sure what you're doing behind my back. But I can go back and watch the video. Anyway, I am very serious. I hope you hear my heart on this. I really want us all to be healthy. It does truly bother me in my heart. I am troubled when I know that one of our families is down, that somebody's having to stay home, or if they're going through it again, or there's multiple children in a family, or if there's just one. We have one family that, bless their hearts, I've been praying for them. Anytime something comes along, they and their kids get it, and I rarely get to see them. So let's lift each other up and do this thing. Let's really make a difference. Let's do what he says for us to do, even if it's not an easy thing, because in my life, anything worthwhile is not usually going to be easy. But it is worthwhile. There's a big payoff if we'll just stick to it. And it generally boils down to my discipline. So let's exercise that this week and let's see what a difference that can make. Amen? Oh, I'm praying. Okay, well, on that vein, let's pray up and stand up and be healthy as we pray up. Okay. Our Father and King, you're so gracious to us. And Father, you've already outlined it all for us. And it's just there for us to decipher, Father. It's there for us to discern. And it's there for us to walk in discipline to benefit from it. And so I pray that everything that you have shown us this day, Father, from the moment we all stepped into this building today, what you spoke to us through praise and worship this morning, let us hang on to it, Father, as if our very life depends on it, because it can be just that. Our life depends on it. Father, through the word that you brought today, through your message, I pray that you would cause us to just hang on to every word that you said to us there, just to cling to it, because our life does depend on walking out your word. Father, the things that were discussed in Midrash today, I pray that you would help us to take them to our heart and to ponder the things that maybe we still need more clarity on, to go to you and your word. Man has opinion. You have the truth. And so help us to just search it out for ourselves and to pray for that discernment, the ability to discern your word, Father, in those places that we are not quite confident. But Father, I do thank you for the ability to come and to discuss it among our brothers and sisters, to figure it out together. Abba, for our health, please, Abba, please help us first to just obey you, to just not overindulge in the blessings that you've given us till we turn them to a curse, Father. We have an abundance of everything we ask for in this nation, from food all the way through. Let us be wise with it, Father. Let us be disciplined in it. And let us not be gluttonous that it brings us into illness, Father, and frustration in our lives. Father, when there are those diseases that are out there and our little ones have to be among them, or we have to be among them, I just pray that as you help us strengthen our immune systems, when that thing does try to enter our body, that you would cause us to be so strong that our body will just burn it up like a flame in an instant, that we don't get ill with it. That you show us the things to do ahead of time. And Father, that I pray that no person would feel that they are being condemned for being sick. It happens. We live in a fallen world. But I am just asking that you would show us how to do the things that can help us just fight harder when those things do come around, and just to be well, Abba, so that we can be as strong as we can be for you. I thank you for touching this person that we prayed for today, and that you have already just so quickly begun to show the answer to our prayer. Let this person feel healing and strength come into their body today, and that you're doing that already, and that we got to share that report today. I pray it for our other families that are home with little ones, Father, that today ends it. It's just done. Let it just be gone from their bodies, and let them be healthy and well, and they wake up in the morning just full of energy and vibrant, and the illness is just gone, because I know you can do that. Help us to do our part too, Abba. I bless you for all that you've done today, and I pray that you would just be with us all, that we would just go in your name, under your authority, and with your peace throughout the rest of this week. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen. So we'll say bye to the live stream. Have a great week. We'll see you on Wednesday for Rosh Chodesh. Before you go here locally, do we have any special days that we need to celebrate real quick? Any birthdays or anniversaries that we need to acknowledge? Let's do, before everybody leaves, do we have any special days?